Everything's under control. Sorry, folks.
Now, our next topic is Splash Mountain. What is going on with Splash Mountain? 2 years ago, they announced, Disney, that they were going to retheme Splash Mountain to Princess and the Frog. They're going to remove, the current theme, which they feel is problematic. They want to go in a different direction, right? And we haven't seen much movement on that front at all. Now, Dre, from what I understand, you have a clip from the Disney Dish podcast with Jim Hill and Len. What's his name? Len Testa.
Len Testa from Touring Plans. Yep, you got it though.
So Jim and Len, they're going to talk a little bit about this, and we're going to listen to this. We're going to pause along the way, kind of break it down. It'll be interesting. So, go ahead. You have the floor, Mr. Vashkai.
Yes, sir.
Even stuff that they announced, like the Splash Mountain redo, where's that?
Yeah, I think that's going to happen in Disneyland. I don't doubt it for a second. Mm-hmm. I will be extremely surprised if Splash Mountain in Walt Disney World gets rethemed to Tiana. And my reasoning for that is they announced this thing a couple of years ago. Mm-hmm. At this point, we should have very detailed concept art. Mm-hmm. We should have an exceptionally good idea of what each scene in the ride is going to be. And frankly, we should have seen contract announcements from Disney. Things should be going out for requests for proposals, RFPs, to vendors to start manufacturing the different ride elements. Mm-hmm. And we haven't seen that. And we're in year 3 of that. So
go ahead.
Okay, so that was Len, right? From what I understand?
Yes.
Okay, he brings up a great point there.
Mm-hmm.
But here's the only thing that I'm kind of questioning about what he's saying. He's saying that he has no doubt that Disneyland will get the Tiana remake, retheme. Florida, though, will not get it. And his kind of reasoning behind that is because there hasn't been any contracting out for this stuff, right? Why would he think that Disneyland's getting it? Because there hasn't been anything, any of that.
If they're going to do one, they would have to do the other because they're going to mirror right back to what the attraction is.
You would think. So here's the interesting thing. From what we have heard is that Splash Mountain at Disneyland and Walt Disney World are being looked at as kind of like two separate projects because those structures are so different, right? And his big thing about, you make a good point there, his big thing about the differences between both of these and why maybe Walt Disney World might not get it and Disneyland might is because of theming. Now, I don't think that's the greatest basis for that, but he does make a good point and good argument.
That was always my argument. Because, I mean, if they really wanted to stick with theming, it doesn't, as much as they would want to change it for whatever purpose, it does not make sense in Florida's because the way Frontierland works, you start coming out of Liberty Square, and then that's where you have the Frontierland theme with the Country Bears, and then it loops around, and then it's going to stop at Splash, and then recontinue where Big Thunder
into the Old
is.
West and Big Thunder.
Yeah.
That's the big issue. And he kind of centers his whole argument around there. But he does make a good point that we haven't really heard from vendors. We haven't even really seen concept art and all these kind of things that implicate both, quite frankly. But we'll let him continue here.
Something's going on in Walt Disney World with that. And we've talked about the issues with that before. I definitely think Tiana deserves a ride in the Magic Kingdom, right? And if Splash Mountain is it, that's fine. The issue that they're running into is the one around theming, right? But there's a whole separate conversation about that, Jim.
Yeah, and you're not wrong. I mean, again, that this was initially announced in June of 2020, and if this were actually happening, we would have heard from vendors.
At this point, 3 years into the announcement, right? Because Disney said, and correct me if I'm wrong here, but in 2020, when they announced it, they said, we've been thinking about this for a while, which means they didn't come up with it last week.
No.
So that's why I think we're on year 3 of this.
Yeah.
And that at year 3, we should have at this point seen more progress. We should have seen a concrete plan for shutting the ride down. Our sources should have told us, like, okay, these things are out for bid, the building of the animatronics, the redoing of the ride vehicles, and so on, right? Again, I think the issue that they're running into there is the theming of Frontierland. We all know that Frontierland runs up until the year 1895, but we know that Princess and the Frog happens in the 1920s, and that 25-year gap is too much to overcome, right?
Yeah.
Do you think? Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just gonna say though, with each passing year, I think there's less and less chances is going to get done, and I think that's for either coast. And the reason why I say that,
I agree.
Yeah, because I think Chapek. Here's the thing, and we kind of saw this with the Florida bill. And he backpedaled, he reversed course with that, but after an enormous amount of pressure, right? Mm-hmm. When it comes to this retheme, which is also a social political thing, right? There's not a whole lot of like pressure to change it. And I think that really at his core, at Chapek's core, I think he really does want to keep Disney pretty neutral. I think he kind of did go back because of the Florida bill heat he was getting, but he's not getting that with Splash Mountain. And from what I understand, this is a very expensive attraction to retheme, and they're having a lot of issues in terms of just the funding right now with everything going on. You know, they just came out of the pandemic where the parks were closed. Hey, look, I think things are kind of stacked against it. I really do. But hey, I mean, you never know.
I may be in the minority here, but when Disney first made the announcement saying that they were kind of thinking of this overall change for quite some times, I could be wrong. And I really feel like because at the time when this was announced, tensions were so high rise because of the political background and what was all involved in it. I personally don't feel like Disney has been working on this for quite some time, because that even just further goes down the argument of saying that if they've been working on this prior to June of 2020, then it would definitely not have taken this long to get absolutely nowhere, to get nothing. Now, if they were to still do it, speaking only more so of Walt Disney World, I still don't think that they will, because I agree with OG. I think the longer the ladder goes, the shorter amount of time that they're going to actually consider doing this. And with Splash Mountain being a beloved attraction, whether you agree with the storyline or not, but just the attraction within itself, it's going to have major downtime, which means a lot of crowd control. And I feel like if they were to do it at Walt Disney World, they would wait for the railroad and Tron to be operational.
They have to. That's no question. But you would think that they would have all their ducks in a row right now at this point to do that.
That is true. Wait. And actually,
by the time those things are open.
Wait, I just dawned on me. Now, would Splash Mountain be done? The railroad would then have to go back down again, wouldn't it?
They could do what they did back when Splash Mountain was being constructed and kind of go back and forth.
Yeah, I mean, with it being done, they're going to want that railroad up. So that's even going to be a delay for Splash Mountain, because they're going to want people to have, I mean, the railroad's been done more so than Tron. I mean, even before the shutdown, the railroad has been done. So it's like they're going to want it to run. So to then have to reroute it, they
could put it in shutdown mode like they did before back in the 90s, when like I said, when or the late 80s when Walt Disney World was actually building Splash Mountain, right? They could. Are they? As we've seen with Tron.
And then it also goes by, depending on their funding, as OG had mentioned, that if they give a half-assed job with an attraction of this scale, they're never going to hear the end of it.
Well, they won't, because this is seen as a social change. So if you go into this and half-ass it, and it's obvious you half-assed it, it's insulting to a lot of people, and you don't want to do that. This version, this Princess and the Frog version, has to be on par or better than what we currently have. Otherwise, they're going to be in a PR mess, and Chapek can't afford that right now. Alia, what do you think about this? I mean, where do you kind of stand with this whole retheming? Do you think it's going to happen? Are you kind of iffy on it, or where are you at?
Well, part of me is like, maybe we should wait till D23 Expo, because if it's going to happen, that's where they're going to announce something about it.
Again, it all comes back down to the expo. We're going to get all the answers at the expo. It's the Holy Grail.
It's the Oracle.
Exactly, right? It's going to tell us so much about the future. No, I agree with you, Alia. That's what I was going to say, and I'm glad you actually said it, because it's like, if we haven't heard, if we don't hear anything about this at the expo, then we know this is done. There's no way. There's no way.
Well, and there's just not, and we talked about this on the phone earlier, Dre. Like, there's not a whole lot of, I think not a whole lot of financial incentive to do it, because they're not going to, it's already a very popular attraction.
Correct.
Like you said, maybe they'll sell more Tiana merch, but you could do that with a new Tiana restaurant though, too, which is like going to be a quarter of the price.
Yeah. And so kind of what everybody wanted.
Right. Exactly. So there's a lot of variables working against this thing.
It is, because like you said, it's kind of a lateral move. Think about it. When you redo a Maelstrom, right? Sure, you didn't add any capacity, but you added demand, right? Now that attraction's going to get, all kinds of lines because people want to see their Frozen characters. Right. The problem with this is that Splash Mountain's already very popular. It's one of the most popular attractions, at least in the summer, that you can possibly get at. So you're not adding capacity and you're not necessarily creating demand. Maybe you create demand in the form of vacation packages because people want to see this attraction because it has been so, talked about initially when it reopens. Sure, that's a possible thing, but you can do that just as easily with all kinds of attractions that really need the kind of the IP or the reimagining treatment. I mean, Walt Disney World is in no short supply of attractions that need to be overhauled and redone. Right? I think we can say that.
And I think if it doesn't happen, they'll kind of put the blame on Tokyo Disney. Because my understanding is Tokyo Disney doesn't want to do this change. And so what they might say is that if they're asked flat out, what about the Tiana, Princess and the Frog reframe for Splash Mountain? They'll probably say because it's not going to be done at Tokyo Disney. It can't be done worldwide. We wanted it unified, and it can't be. That's why we decided not to go forward with it. We'll probably kind of throw Tokyo Disney under the bus there.
And if they truly had this concept in mind prior to their announcement, I were to think that they would have used the shutdown as sort of like that opportunity. That way it would have been down at least
construction time, yeah.
Right, at least they could have at least started it. It would have still been done by the time the parks would have been reopened, but that would have been the opportunity to do so, not to just say, oh, yeah, well, we've been, thinking about this for quite some time. We're going to announce it now, wait for it to open, and then 2 years later, we'll show you a piece of concept art.
I don't know, with it, I will disagree a little bit on that, simply because, remember, when they announced this in June of 2020, the parks reopened shortly thereafter, at least Walt Disney World. So it's like you don't necessarily want that capacity hit at a time when you need as much capacity as you can possibly get because demand's going to be so high, right? So it kind of makes sense that they might, back end us a little bit, but now we're kind of getting into like Epic Universe is going up quick, right? It's going up fast. Tron is kind of, it's getting pretty close to really opening. Honestly, I mean, what I'm hearing is, late 2022 is kind of when they want that kind of thing to open right here. So we're getting to a point now where it's like you can take the capacity hit with Splash Mountain being down. But it's like we haven't seen any momentum towards that arrangement.
That is true, but now with Disneyland have been closed for how long, and everyone was kind of aiming towards this to be more of a Disneyland attraction more than Walt Disney World. Could that have been the same way that they could have at least started with the time frame, or did they really? So they really didn't know exactly if they were really going to do this or not. I feel like, and it's a sticky situation, but I think really at the time Disney was more so beckoned to the call because of the issues that were going on at the time.
The way I've heard it told to me by the sources that we mutually have. The way I was told about it was there was like a 2-person team or a very small team looking into the possibility of overlaying Splash Mountain with, Princess and the Frog. And at a time when, this project was announced, that team hadn't really moved up. From what I understand, they hastily commissioned that art that we saw and then use it all over the press releases and so forth. Didn't provide any more explanation than just the details that were in that announcement and that one piece of concept art. And now they're moving forward. And from what I understand, it was, there's a very procedural thing that they do with the Disney Parks blog. Like you have to get, you have to get a range of approvals. You have to get it scheduled in specific ways, and that's like months in advance, and it's all these kind of things because Disney's so anal about, public relations and their press and so forth, that you want to be in control of the story. And this thing was just railroaded. I mean, this thing was just like boom, and it took a lot of factions of the company by surprise because just of how expensive this process actually was going to be. And so the fact that we haven't really heard more than that, as this audio goes on to relate, we have a lot of people, responding to things, but not really a plan. And I think this was, like George's point was, it was a response to some of the social political environment at the time. Right. But now we're seeing maybe the consequences of doing something like that, because now you have people who look at Splash Mountain in a very different way than they did before. Right. You have people really wanting this attraction. And like OG said, the financial incentive to do that, it might just not be there. This is a minimum $100 million per attraction. At minimum. Good. And then, what happens from there? Yeah.
Now, do we have more audio from Jim Hill?
Oh, we got a little bit. We can play that.
Okay, let's go ahead. Let's go ahead and continue with interesting conversation.
Sure.
The Frontierland includes cars and dates up to 1920, but it doesn't really, right? The closing of the American West, we date to around 1895.
Just this week, we got the announcement of the first haunted house for this year's Universal Halloween Horror Nights, which was the classic Universal Monsters. And Epic Universe opens in 2025. They've got a whole land set aside to celebrate the Universal Monsters. So, I mean, you could literally see Universal has a plan. We're going to reintroduce these characters. And they did a house last year for Bride of Frankenstein. There's literally rocks in the river they're going to hit on their way to reintroducing these characters in the theme park. And Disney, 3 years after they announced, we're putting Tiana in Splash Mountain. How? Did you see the one piece of concept art? Look at that.
I think you and I have both heard the same rumor that one possible way for Disney to get around this is to focus Splash Mountain on the time before Tiana was princess. So like in the years before Tiana was born, and just use the other Princess and the Frog characters. Like this is what they were like before they met Tiana, right? Which gets around the issue of the 1895 date, but does not fulfill the promise of putting Tiana in the ride.
Yeah.
So there's all sorts of like, how do you make good on that? And I think you and I have both heard the rumor that you could turn Pecos Bills into Tiana's restaurant.
You could. You could.
You could, which is, again, that's not the same thing as a ride, right? There would be legitimate concerns about representation and equity there, which I think are something that would need to be addressed. And I don't know how Disney gets around that.
No. There just doesn't seem to be a plan. There seems to be a lot of people reacting to things. It's like, okay, we have a plan. We have a path. It's like, oh my God, this just happened. It's like.
Yeah, exactly.
That's it.
Based on where Pecos Bill is located, in my personal opinion, at Walt Disney World, I don't really see Tiana's place there, to be honest with you. It just, I would actually see more of Hungry Bear becoming Tiana's place.
Hungry Bear makes total sense.
Total. Yeah. But here's the thing. I think it was a little unfair for them to kind of talk about the no plan thing, because they're kind of comparing apples and oranges. They kind of use Epic Universe. Well, see, Epic Universe is planning ahead. They're building this monster thing.
Sure.
But that's a whole new theme park. You have to plan ahead for that. I mean, this is a re-theming, and it's not the same. It's an apples and oranges situation. I mean, it's you know what I'm saying? I mean,
yeah,
it's different. It is different.
I think it is absolutely different. It is absolutely different when it comes to that. And if they were to say, well, we have a plan maybe for the replacement of I think Shrek 4D out there in Universal Studios Florida, that maybe that might be a more apt comparison. But to their point, it's Now, Len Testa makes a big point about like theming when it comes to like Frontierland, and that is definitely a big concern. I don't think those things are insurmountable, but how much money do you necessarily want to apply to make that happen? Right. And so it's all those kind of logistical issues. Apparently, they've gone through the Splash Mountain at Disneyland, Splash Mountain at Walt Disney World, and Splash Mountain at Disneyland. Like, yes, that fits more in line with New Orleans Square, right? And I do agree with you, George. A Hungry Bear redo to make it into like Tiana's place, and you could even have like the multiple tiers represent like a steamboat and stuff like that. You could do some really outrageous stuff there, really, if you wanted to. But it's like that the amount of expense that you would need to do that ride in comparison to Splash Mountain is immense. And then, Splash Mountain in Walt Disney World is immense. And then when you look at Splash Mountain in Walt Disney World, I mean, it's just like, how do you overcome those issues as it relates to the time period? I just don't know how you do this.
It's a challenge. It's a real challenge. And look, I mean, this is something that Disney was definitely, it was a response to the summer of 2020. So I think that there was, like, to their point, I mean, there was a bit of a rush job on this because I feel like it was a total it was reactionary. It was, you know?
Yeah.
But I don't know. We'll see. I think that with each year that goes by, I think that there's less and less political and financial will to do this. And I just think that there's a huge price tag, and the parks are just now recovering from after the pandy. And I don't know. There's a lot going against it.
I think that if Disneyland Forward does move forward, especially after all this mess that we were talking about in the previous conversation, I truly feel like Disney is going to have more that they want to accomplish before doing a retheme of Splash Mountain. I think that's literally on the bottom of their to-do list.
Yeah, I mean, my whole contention with you, George, is there's so many other things that need money right now. And remember, Disney's in a very financial precarious situation. I mean, yes, the stock, you know, maybe had gone up. That hasn't been the trend for the last 52 weeks or whatever, right? The CapEx, problem, capital expenditure problem, where it's like, how much you finance certain projects or even certain divisions and stuff like that. I mean, that's all got to get weighed. And so, the Parks and Resorts division is only going to get so much, right, in comparison to previous years. And it's like, what are you going to do with those funds? Where do you want to apply those funds? And it's like, I don't think at this point Splash Mountain is necessarily the direction to go into right now. And far more other places to put that money.
And it's just like the conversation that we were having the other night about Walt Disney World with the lack of attractions in the parks. Mm-hmm. They're just now going to open up an e-ticket attraction, Tron, in Magic Kingdom. Yeah. So the next point of sale, so to speak, is to do another attraction in Magic Kingdom.
To have a capacity hit? I don't think so. It's just not palatable at all.
Right. No, exactly. There's too much going against this thing. There's too much, and they're never going to officially cancel it. I'm telling you right now, you guys, because it is so tied to these social issues, they're never going to come out and say, hey, it's officially canceled. What they'll do is they'll just kind of kick the can down the road and just kind of never make any progress with it. And eventually it'll kind of fall out of the public consciousness and people won't even, it's basically like the Rocket Rod's reopening spring of 2001. Right, that sign was up there forever. It was kind of like an indefinite kind of thing, and it never came back. And there's no official end date. Like there was no official statement by Disney saying Rocket Rides are not coming back. They just never came back, And I think that's kind of what's going to happen here. Most likely is that they just they'll never build it. It'll just kind of be.
Yeah, I mean it's if they don't mention anything at D23 Expo, how many people are really going to hold their feet in the fire on this? To be honest, I mean, I think they can get away without doing something. And there'll be some people maybe saying one thing or another, but the news about everything else that's coming will have dominated the news cycle, and that's that. There may be, when they put these things down for refurbishment or whatever, there may be talks about like, hey, is this refurbishment? Is this going to be the one, kind of thing? But that's really going to be it. 2OG's statement there. I just don't. I mean, I think you can get away with backtracking on this, at least quietly, and maybe setting this aside for years down the line to where these capital expenditure issues might be resolved. Maybe they can do it properly, that kind of thing. But
Right.
Alia, what do you have to say on this? Do you think it's likely that they go forward with this? Do you think it's maybe the capital expenditure issues that they have right now, maybe their debt issues may prevent this project from going forward at the time that maybe people want it to be? What's your kind of thought on all this?
Oh, I feel so wishy-washy as feeling neutral until news from D23 Expo. But okay, I'll try to properly guess. I think it's on pause. I don't think it's been canceled, but I think it's on pause because of the financial issue. I mean, they could stretch it out, but then, as explained, that would affect Splash Mountain, would probably affect the railroad, and everybody loves the railroad, and that's already been affected by Tron and Walt Disney World. I mean, they might, what they could do is kind of a compromise olive branch, you could say, show goodwill, is that they could start the process at Disneyland, start it with Disneyland, stretch out that, and then once that's done, then years down the line go to Walt Disney World. That they might do that.
Yeah, possible. They're in a tough spot. They're in a tough spot because there's just so many. Like, the theme thing is a huge issue, not for Disneyland. I mean, honestly, Princess and the Frog for Splash Mountain at Disneyland theme wise is like kind of like a chef's kiss, like perfection, because it straddles Critter Country and New Orleans Square, and Princess and the Frog IP plays to both of those. Yeah. It's really flawless. Florida, as mentioned many times on the show, has theming issues. When you change that attraction to Princess and the Frog, there's major theming issues. So people say, well, why don't you make Splash Mountain in Walt Disney World another inclusive property that isn't Princess and the Frog but fits that Frontierland theme? That's an option, but that's even more money they got to shell out, because now you're creating an entirely new overlay or retheme to the thing. It's even gonna be more expensive, and it just it's a rock and a hard place. And I think you're right, Alia. I think it's definitely on hold right now. I don't think it's moving forward. I think it's kind of in, like they say in the film industry, developmental hell, basically. That purgatory, that's where it's at.
Pretty much.
We may all be surprised and shocked at D23, but
and hey, I'm glad to be wrong on this. I'm if they announce something at D23 Expo, hey, more power to them. But we haven't really seen any rumblings of that going into there. But I mean, if they do, and like you said, Alia, it might be something to where they do Disneyland's first, get that whole thing squared away and arranged, and then do Walt Disney World later. That way, you still have momentum driving towards that end, but you're just stretching it out a little bit longer than maybe you necessarily would under different economic conditions and so forth.
Now, Dre, I have a question for you. Actually, the whole panel, but I'll start with you, Dre. My question to you, and it just kind of dawned on me, and I'm just kind of throwing it out there, see what you guys think. There's been talk, and surprising talk, from like Mice Chat, Dusty Sage, and I think even WDWNT also mentioned it, that they might announce a renovated Tomorrowland at Disneyland. And there's been a lot of murmur and chatter over this. And the reason why I'm bringing that up with this conversation is, do you think it's possible Disney looked at the financials and said, okay, we can spend X amount of money retheming an attraction that's already popular, or we can take that money that we would have thrown into Splash Mountain and redirect it into a new Tomorrowland where we might see more benefit, financial, attendance, and all that stuff? Is that possible that Tomorrowland is now in the conversation because it's redirected funds?
to do a whole land for the price of an like a redone attraction, that would be a stretch, but maybe, I mean,
but
maybe
it's like
though.
Splash Mountain's $100 million to redo it.
You're
minimum.
You're probably gonna need like $300 million to do Tomorrowland,
right? And
to be honest.
For Tomorrowland,
unless they want to break it up in phases and they want to take the initial capital that would have been directed towards Splash Mountain,
$300 million and a bottle of Valium.
Sector 2, Malfunction in Sector 2. All droids will be shut down for reloading of labor programs. Stand by for power disconnect.